Yo, a good shepherd get life to the sheep, leash nice, but nah, he ain't nice underneath. Got a price on the leash, I don't trust when they speak. Be sounding real spite for the meat. Boy, I bleed with the best, got a peep with the eagle and downs. I done feed with the flesh, tryna smear with the rain. She believe that I'm blessed, got a speed to the left. All of my clothes, I be eager to mesh, oh no.
Today we have with us the second motorcycle from the Bajaj Triumph partnership, and for many people the more exciting one. This is the new Triumph Scrambler 400X. And after having ridden it today, I can tell you that it's actually quite a bit more different to the Speed 400 than many of you might have expected. Let's start with the way it looks. You have seen the bike online, but I'd like to take you through some smaller details. There's quite a bit that's different on this motorcycle. The headlamp grille is standard on this bike, the handguards are standard, and it gets a different headlamp mount as well. Over towards the side panel is a little different. You've got a nice number board on the other side. It's a hark back to the old school Scramblers. Those were actual race bikes and their race numbers were put on that board on the side out there. Further back, you've got a new twin pipe exhaust design. It not only looks different to the Speed 400 and better in my opinion, it also sounds a little different. Quite familiar, but a little more blatty and a little more interesting sounding. Then you have a new 19-inch front wheel. This gives the bike a slightly different set of proportions. It also looks different. It's a different design with a braced center there for that off-road riding. And finally at the back, a new set of grab rails. The seats are different as well, and the Scrambler gets 3 color options with a more subtle looking graphic across the fuel tank. Now that's what you can expect from the looks, but there's also another big difference in how you sit on this motorcycle. It immediately feels a lot bigger than the Speed 400. You've got a wide handlebar here. That alone gives you a much more commanding feel of the bike, and you're sitting higher up. The Speed 400 has a 790mm seat height. This is up to 835. It's a big jump and it's mostly down to the raised suspension travel, which we'll get to in a bit. But the feeling is that you're on a taller motorcycle, it feels more substantial, and that solves the problem for many people who just thought that the Speed 400 was too small. Comfort is also better. The wider handlebar I think feels quite nice, but the foot pegs are also in a more relaxed riding position, and this overall feels like something that you could spend more time in. If you're a taller person, you will definitely find this to be quite comfortable. I can comfortably get my feet down, but to give you a more accurate description of what it's like for the average rider, I'm going to call Ashley in here. He is 5'6", and he's going to show you what it's like to sit on the Scrambler 400X. Complete tiptoes, Ashley?
Yes,
Completely tiptoes. So maybe 5'8" onwards, you'd be a little more comfortable. Something to keep in mind. But that only tells half the story, because this is a Scrambler. You're going to want to take it off-road. So what are the ergonomics like? Well, it's actually quite nice. There is a bit of a lean down to the handlebar, but not too much. The interface between the legs and the motorcycle is nice. When you're standing up, you can grip the bike nicely, get a good sense of control. And the wide handlebar feels good here as well. Right, so that's what's happening on the surface, but there's also quite a bit that's different with the chassis. First of all, like we said, 19-inch front wheel, that changes the dynamics quite a bit. There's also more suspension travel, 150mm at both ends. Now this is more than the standard Speed 400, 10mm more at the front and 20mm more at the back. But it's not up there with an off-road motorcycle. The average adventure bike is about 170 to 180mm, if not more, and this finds a middle ground. But then again, it's a Scrambler, so that's okay. In fact, the whole wheelbase is quite a bit longer than the Speed 400, and all of that has an effect on the way the bike feels on the road. Immediately, you will find that this is not as reactive and as fast and sporty feeling as the Speed 400. It handles all right, but it's not something that you'll want to go attacking corners with. Feels completely natural, but more like a bike you just sit on and go with the flow of the corners rather than hanging off and trying to get quite aggressive. When it comes to suspension comfort, things are quite similar to the Speed 400, which is no bad thing because that bike has excellent ride quality. The Scrambler suspension is well controlled, it doesn't feel soft or wallowy, and while you can't exactly call it plush magic carpet ride quality, it handles bad roads very well. As for the tires, it's on MRF tires as standard. They're different tires front and rear. The front is a zapper curve, which is not a radial, and the rear is a revs. What we've done today, these tires seemed perfectly all right. I didn't really have too much of a grip issue, but again, not pushing too hard. When you really start to push, getting out of corners, you'll feel a bit of a loss of grip on the exit. It's not what the bike is really about, but if you want to ride that way, you might want to put some different tires on the bike.
It's a similar story with the brakes. The Scrambler 400 gets a larger 320mm front disc to help deal with the extra inertia of that bigger and heavier front wheel. But this bike uses organic brake pads instead of the sintered pads that you'll find on the Speed 400. The result is a dull initial brake bite, which is nice off-road, but the lever demands too much effort for hard braking. Actual performance is good, but you'll need to really pull the brake lever hard. And if you like riding quickly on the street, you'll probably want to install some better brake pads. As for the MRF tires, they were decent in the dry off-road conditions that we were riding on, but we'll talk more about that soon. First, let's discuss the engine.
This motor is effectively the same as the Speed 400. It makes 40 horsepower, 37.5 Newton meters of torque, and it has more or less the same power delivery. Like the Speed 400, it really comes alive at 3000 RPM, and that 3000 to 7000 RPM mark is amazing. The effortless drive that you get is what makes this engine so nice. Above 6.5, 7000 RPM, you do start to get some vibrations. But again, you don't really need to rev this engine out even if you're going quickly. And that means you don't have to spend too much time in the vibration zone.
What Triumph has changed is the front sprocket, which is now one tooth smaller, and that significantly shortens the overall gearing. However, the chunky rear tire has a much bigger diameter than what you'll find on the Speed 400, and that has an effect of making the overall gearing taller. Triumph says that the idea behind the smaller front sprocket was to balance this out, and that the Scrambler has similar overall gearing to the Speed on paper. In reality, it felt more or less the same, although I did think that the bike was slightly more relaxed at a steady 100 to 110 kph cruise, which is a good thing. But if you go any faster, you will feel the short-geared nature of this engine. In the city, that short gearing, along with the awesome mid-range and good heat management, made the Speed 400 a beautifully quick and effortless bike to commute on. Much of that feeling translates to the Scrambler as well, and this motorcycle feels very easy to maneuver as long as you are comfortable with the tall seat height. Aside from that, the only other difference is that the wider handlebar and those handguards will get in your way a bit more through tight gaps. But otherwise, this is also a very nice bike for a daily commute. We also managed to put the Scrambler through our full performance and efficiency test cycles, and the numbers are pretty much on par with the Speed 400.
So that's how this motorcycle rides on the road. But if you're purchasing a motorcycle called the Scrambler, you probably want to take it off-road as well. And there are quite a few things going in this bike's favor. We've already talked about the ergonomics being pretty decent. There is more suspension travel, but most of all, there's more ground clearance. It's now 195 mm, which isn't far off from the proper ADV bikes. That is a significant amount. You don't have to worry. And there's a pretty solid bash plate as well. From what we've experienced today, this is quite fun. You have enough power to slide the bike around, you can jump it off a few rocks, but you need to keep yourself reined in, because when you start to push a lot, the first thing you'll notice is that you don't have a lot of travel in the front. And if you hit something hard, your mind immediately goes to, oh God, I need to look after the alloy wheels. Essentially, it's a sort of bike where you're riding down a road, you look to the side, you see a nice trail, sure, go ahead, go explore it, the bike will take you there. There are some other nice things as well. The foot pegs are nice and wide with teeth on them. You can easily remove the rubber, there's no bolt, pop them off, and you've got more grip for your feet. Essentially, the Scrambler 400X is a road bike, but one that also encourages you to explore the unknown. You can effectively take this bike anywhere, but just don't take it too seriously. The final nice part of riding this bike off-road is that, like the Speed 400, you can turn off the traction control from the instrument console. But unlike the Speed 400, you can also deactivate the rear ABS. So you have the safety of front ABS and you have the fun of turning the rear system off. The final part of today's off-road aspect is something I don't really get to talk about too often, and that's how the bike falls down. Unfortunately, I misjudged a bit of mud. It wasn't as firm as it looked. The front washed away and the bike fell over. It was quite slow, and here's how the motorcycle took the impact. The plastic handguard broke and the tip of the brake lever broke off as well. However, the crash protector here protected the engine, it protected the fuel tank, there's not a speck on either of them. The foot pegs are absolutely fine, the brake lever is not bent at all, and the exhaust has some minor scuffs on it.
It was a little surprising to see that the handlebar got slightly bent as well, and that, along with the plastic handguards, suggests that this motorcycle wasn't built to take too much abuse off-road. But the important thing here is that the damage was mostly small and shouldn't be scary expensive to repair. The really important thing was that I was able to pick the bike up, complete our shoot, and ride back to our destination for the day without any problems.
So that's what the Triumph Scrambler 400X is about. In some ways, it's rather similar to the Speed 400, particularly in how the engine feels. But in many other ways, this really comes across as a different motorcycle, and it differentiates itself from the Speed quite nicely, more than I was expecting, in fact. For many people, especially taller, larger folks, this will probably be the Triumph of choice. And as for the price, at 2.63 lakhs, it is another extremely well-priced product from Triumph. It costs about 30,000 rupees more than the Speed 400, but it's still about 20,000 rupees less than the most basic 390 Adventure model and a full 1 lakh rupees less than the top 390 Adventure. That is excellent pricing once again, and it's something that Royal Enfield is going to have to think about long and hard when it comes to how they decide to price the upcoming Himalayan 450.